Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? Good. Awesome. Well, I'm Jessica Fan. I am an SVP and a Senior Client Officer at Ipsos, and it's such a great pleasure to have you all here tonight at this iconic Hotel Chelsea. And looking around this room with a mix of creative talent, industry leaders, I can't think of a better place to pull back the curtain to talk about the evolution of the creator economy. And this building has always been a sanctuary where those who live to tell stories. In fact, a colleague of mine recently told me a story that I think truly captures the soul of this place. He told me his childhood friend named Chris, whose mom was the very first Ralph Lauren supermodel, whose dad also shot those ads, and those ads are still on the billboards that still exist in LA today. And in this very hotel was where he grew up. His dad, Lake Goldberg, lived here for 20 years. Yeah. This is a place where the walls are built with legendary narratives that's raw and at is artistic truth. And so that's the spirit of storytelling, and that's exactly why we're here tonight. Well, thank you, Sarah. So we're here to share an exclusive research study that it's a global study that's conducted by Ipsos in partnership with Snapchat and Publicis. And we have an incredible panel here tonight, and shortly they'll share some of the data. But at a very high level, what we found is that the creator economy is no longer just a playground. What we've learned is it is a $250 billion global force, massive, and it's projected to grow significantly in the next year. And when we go inside the creator mind, it's beginning to show that old myths are being debunked. And what we've seen is that it's not about content going viral. It's about content that creates this connectivity, longevity, as well as authenticity. And creators are looking for partners today that allows them to partner, allows them to be able to create content, give them the freedom to create content, and partner with brands that aligns with their values. So tonight, we'll explore the creators and how they use different platforms as their superpower to create content, whether it's creating very high polished content on Instagram or it's raw, FaceTime-like Snapchat. And so our goal today is for you to leave with some fresh insights in terms of ways in which you can partner and take some of your strategies up to the next level. And we have a fantastic panel here today of experts, as well as a very special guest, a Snap Star creator, who share their perspective. So with that, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Whitney Krause. She is the president at Ipsos to kick things out. So.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you, and welcome everybody. We're so happy to be here. Thank you for being in this warm, cozy room when it's so incredibly cold outside. So we're very thrilled to have everyone. I am joined, as Jess mentioned, by Artie, who is the Global Head of Research and Insights at Snap. We have our very own Snap Star here in Gianna. Welcome, we're so happy to have you. And then Yak here, who is the Head of Creator Innovation at Influential, part of Publicis. So thank you all so much for joining, really appreciate it. Jess kicked things off, so I'm just gonna get started with a little bit of context and then we'll dive right in. So we have seen a massive evolution in the creator economy over the past couple of years. There was a recent IAB Creators Economy Review where 48% of US marketers say it's an absolute must to be thinking about creators as part of their strategy, half of people. And then over 200 million people today identify as creators. Now, of course, the scope of those creators varies wildly, but we're talking about a massive shift just in terms of the number of people who are out there creating content, et cetera. So it's interesting though, because even with those volumes and those numbers, we have a lot of research that exists out in the space on consumer perceptions of creators. What we didn't have was what the creator POV actually is. What do they want from brands? What are they looking for from platforms? And what are their expectations of their followers? And so it's super fantastic to be here. Artie, I'll hand it over to you. Could you talk a little bit about how this research came to be, just kind of given that void of content about creators themselves? And then we'll get started. So.
Yeah. So my role at Snap is really to work on industry thought leadership, trying to figure out where the industry is going in terms of content, advertising, and Snap was not really built for creators. It grew very organically and it's growing so quickly. So when a lot of questions arose as to, oh, how are consumers looking at creators? What are the best practices? One of the big gaps we realized was nobody actually asked creators what they wanted. And the number that stood out to me was if 200 million people today are considering themselves creators, whatever way, shape, or form it might be, it means that they're a force to be reckoned with. And just like any other channel, you need to understand how the channel works, and especially if it's made up of so many individuals. So that was really the genesis of this piece of work. And we were very curious because creators were growing so much on the platform. So we wanted to understand, what are their expectations from platforms like ours, from brands, how do you work with brands, and how do they build a community, and what is that interaction looking like? And that was really the genesis of this piece of work.
Fantastic. And so thank you so much. What we did with that is Ipsos and Snap and Publicis all got together, and we wanted a really robust view of creators to have like a wide perspective to sort of leverage. So we surveyed over 1,100 creators in 6 markets, obviously including the US, the UK, et cetera. And that was a mix of both qual and quantitative methods, because we really wanted to make sure that we had sort of that quantitative background, but could get really robust in some of our one-on-one types of direct conversations as well. The criteria were things like use Snap as well as one other platform, are creating on a regular sort of basis, and then we had a varying level of like volume of followers for the different creators that we talked to. So Artie, I'll go back to you, and then also Yak, I'd love your perspective on this. How, just to set the stage, I guess, how is the content creation space and social consumption like changing when we think about the overall platforms? How have like the role that creators played with consumers, how's it evolved in the past couple of years?
I think obviously one of the biggest trend you've noticed is the growth of native content. And on Snap, I think, when we started thinking about and saw the growth of creators back in like Q4 of 2024, we saw that there's a 40% growth in creators creating content on the platform. And you're seeing that more of this UGC or user-generated native content, whatever you see growing on the platform, that to me is the biggest trend. And obviously I'm speaking from the Snap perspective, but the platform is kind of set up for creation. So you open up the platform, it's the camera, you're able to use the lenses and create a lot of things and share it. So that's another thing that we are seeing, like a lot less polished and a lot more in the moment, off the cuff, and very native, I would say, is like the biggest trend that we have noticed on the platform.
I will add a little bit to that. So creation and consumption, the back and forth has evolved, thank goodness. One of the ways I think you can see that is through the long-term relationships that we all have with those we follow, right? So when you think about who we follow, we follow a lot of different people, a lot of different creators, but there are a certain number of creators that you follow that you have a relationship with. So audiences are going to look at that creator as a companion, as a friend, as an advisor. I would even go as far as to say as a trusted filter. So for example, if we think about Gianna and Gianna's profile and what she brings to the table as a creator, it's lifestyle driven, right? She is very open with her content. If you don't follow, I would highly recommend. You get a really good understanding of what it takes to build a relationship with an audience. It feels unscripted at moments, and she brings you along on this journey, and so you feel like you're not just watching the content, you are part of an experience. And I think that's a huge portion of how this has all evolved. The other piece that I think we're just touching is this concept of social search versus zero click. What I mean by that is social search is becoming a thing where we're not leaving the platform, right? So limited number of clicks. Now, it's still happening. But what that tells us is that the relationship with the creator, who you're following, and the platform you're on matters more and more. Because if you're willing to stay on platform and do the search, that means trust. And that trust is created because of relationships that the creators are developing and the community that they're building.
That's fantastic. So thinking about that trust, I feel like the environment really matters. And so one of the things that we found in the research is that over a third of creators have basically platform-specific content strategies where they're going out and doing different things based on the platform that they're on. Particularly for Snapchat, we have some perceptions of creating a more authentic connection with followers. There's a lot of opportunity for creating a really positive environment, a real direct sort of like relationship, type of build with the followers, specifically on the Snap platform. So, Gianna, I'd love to turn it over to you. Could you talk a little bit about how you cater content, to platforms, and what types of things would you say you specifically are doing on Snap versus maybe another platform, and talk a little bit about that strategy?
Yeah, so I post across all platforms, primarily short form content, lifestyle content, sharing my life in New York City. But on other platforms, it's definitely more planned out and produced. I have a specific video topic that I'm talking about, and I've planned out what I'm going to say. But with Snapchat, because of the story feature, I don't plan it out at all. I just open directly to the camera right when I wake up, and I bring my viewers along with me throughout my entire day until I go to sleep. So I post on other platforms, maybe up to 10 times a day max. On Snapchat, I'm posting over 100 times a day, sometimes 200, 300 times a day.
Yeah, so I was hoping you were going to mention that because there is a volume component too as a result of that. And it's interesting that you mentioned because in the research, we also found some similar themes where when you look at like a platform like Instagram, for example, our creators are thinking that that's like much more for like highly curated, specific content, specific posts. Same thing with YouTube, like highly edited, planned out in advance, scheduled, etc. Snapchat like allows you a lot more flexibility and kind of like speaks to that authenticity theme that I mentioned earlier. So I have a question though. So when you post 100 times a day, first of all, wow, you must be tired. But second of all, is there any like sort of like time of day? Is it that first thing in the morning? Like when are you like kind of like most energized on what you're doing?
It's throughout the whole day because it's when I start off and maybe what I'm going to do for the day. And sometimes I don't even know. And what's really cool about Snapchat in particular, because I'm not processing like the whole video at once and then getting feedback, I'm getting feedback throughout the entire day as I'm posting. So I can take my viewers' feedback. If they're like, hey, there's this event going on in New York City, I don't know if you knew about it, and I don't have plans, I'll go and show it to them. So it's really cool because they get to be actually part of the story, and in real time I can incorporate their feedback.
Which they must think is so cool.
I mean, when I first saw the number, I think on average it was like 140. If you look at the top creators, and I'm like, 100. There has to be a mistake. Maybe it's an extra one or an extra zero. As a researcher, I always like have to be skeptical.
Critique the numbers, obviously.
But then I see that most of it is like through stories. So you're like posting tile of behind the scene. And there are some people who are their friends without makeup, they're getting ready for the date. So it's pretty much like as I'm living, I'm posting, which I think is very different and also shows how much like the content has evolved from what it used to be like 4 years ago, or I say evolved 4 years ago, but that's how fast things are moving in this space, which is fascinating for somebody on the outside to observe, and for speaking to people like Gianna to actually see what they do is amazing.
Yes, actually, Art, I was actually going to go to you. So what do you think it is about Snap that makes it so easy to sort of like authentically be doing that on an ongoing basis throughout the day? Like what is so special about the platform?
There's a joke. I don't know if you ever see Evan Spiegel's LinkedIn profile. He says he's the VP of Product at Meta. It's because Snap's where stories first started, right? So you open up the camera, you open up the app, it opens to the camera, and then you can quickly take snaps and you post your stories. And that's like a very easy way to create content, but it's also a very organic way to create. So one of the things we've noticed is and I think this is what the research proved as well, is the fact that it's easy to create, but it also is like very in the moment, off the cuff, kind of what the consumers on the platform, especially the younger audiences like Gen Z, like very lo-fi, less edited version of content that's easy to produce, right? Volume is okay. And the other thing is there's also a lot of like video and audio effects and tools which are available. You can add a filter, text effects, music, etc., which makes creation easy. And Janice nodding, so I'm assuming that she agrees with me.
Uh-huh.
And that also came up in the research, and the fact that you're not like chasing a like or a comment, but you're really building a community. You won't have like millions and millions and millions of followers, but you do have people who are involved, and you can like they're literally chatting with you as you're creating. I think that's also what makes it easy to create on Snap and what makes it unique.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so, Yak, if we take maybe a little bit of a broader perspective, do you advise on like a platform-specific content strategy for the creators that you work with, or is there like a tailored approach that you take, or does it depend on the creator? How do you do that?
It's well, so the value of a platform really ends up being less about, in my opinion, less about the platform and more about the question of is what happens when you put the creator and the audience, or the creator and the consumer together. What is the actual behavior that's taking place, right? So first you got to figure that out. If you're a brand and you want to lean into a specific ethos, a specific approach, identify that, and then go back and find out, okay, depending on the platform, what's the experience or the behavior that I want to lean into, and then as a brand, decide on where in that moment you want to engage. And if you do it that way, for example, let's take Snap. So Snap there's an inner circle feeling about Snap. It's seeping with authenticity. And the reason for that is the heritage of starting as a chat. So it's already built in. They're not followers, they're friends. So understanding that the relationship that Gianna has with her friends on Snap requires hundreds, which even saying it out loud is nuts, hundreds of posts a day tells you that behavior, it's not the content, although that's important, it's the behavior. And the behavior is a constant communication and trust from Gianna that she's going to share all this, and a trust from the audience that they're going to get the kind of experience they want, and they're going to be honest about their feedback, right? So then as a brand, you can lean in. And I think if you do those two things, and then you bring relevance and value, right? So as a brand, it's critical that you look at that situation and you go, how do I add to that? Not force myself, but go, okay, how do I partner with Gianna to say, how do I become part of this and add value to what you were already doing in a way that it seems unique and special? The audience will lean into that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So, okay, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk, and Gianna, we'll come to you, but the research found that there's obviously things that creators are prioritizing across the needs for different platforms. Top challenges are obviously things like making sure that we have an engaged audience, engaged follower team, maybe followers are leaving platforms and why. Maybe the, platforms themselves don't necessarily have alignment with your particular values, or there's negative perceptions, those kinds of things. Also, though, when we're talking to creators, we found a lot about things that they're focused on and wants and needs from platforms. So particular tools to help them create better content, make that easier, analytics and information about the audience and how we're interacting with fans and followers and friends, etc. Gianna, what are some of the things that you feel like you rely on from like a tool perspective, feature perspective across different platforms, and maybe potentially what's on your wish list, or what are some of the things you're not seeing?
I think my favorite features are the ones where I get to bring the audience into the content, because even though I like sharing my interests, but I want to also share things that are interesting to them as well. And that's why I really love the story replies feature. I think across all platforms, all features, that one's my favorite, because it's kind of like comments on a video, but I feel like comments on a video are more for other viewers versus the story reply just goes directly to me. So people are speaking to me like they know I'm the only one reading the messages, and it's really valuable because if I see multiple people sending me the same thing, can you talk about this? They haven't seen each other's messages, so I'm like, oh, there's really a demand for this among my audience. But there's also features like polls I really like using too. Any type of community building features, like I think a feature I would like is if there was a way to do a big group chat where we could all just type in the chat, and then even if I'm busy doing something, then my followers could talk to each other in the chat. That would be on my wish list.
That's super cool because it's all different ways that you get more interactivity to some degree. So, Artie, could you talk a little bit about what tools, like what is Snapchat working on, what's already available, like what are some of those things that you really think help creators be able to drive engagement across the groups?
mean, we look at it as three dimensions. One is the tools that are already available, which is our video and audio editing tools. The second, which I really like, because even I've attended it literally last week, which is Snap School. So it's run by Brooke, who's the head of creator partnership. She's amazing. And it essentially, the team curates like groups of creators and trains them on how to use the platform, because it's not always intuitive, right? And one of the things that the research revealed was it's not the same content works in every platform. So how do you create for the platform? It's almost like a boot camp, if you will, for creation. And I'm not a creator, I'm a lurker. But I wanted to see, what it was to be a creator on Snap. So I attended that school, which I think is great. And the third is enabling creators to be able to build their community on a platform, but also brands to be able to land their message through bespoke ad products. So one of it is, we have ads on chat. So on Snap, obviously, snapping is a big thing. Last year we scaled up ads on chat, but now we have creator ads. So creators could, so in your chat, if you open up, there could be a creator who could have a chat, and you can communicate with them, and that'll help the creator build the community. And then eventually, they could partner with a brand and have a conversation instead of just an ad, which I think is pretty cool. And literally, like last month, we launched Creator Subscription, where fans, followers, community, whatever you call them, could pay a fee for the creator to get access to exclusive content and polling, and maybe have more detailed chat, etc. Again, I think it's pretty cool because it kind of gives the power of building a community to the creator, and also another channel to help them monetize.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Gianna's nodding along, so it sort of sounds.
I just started using the subscriptions. I'm having so much fun.
Pass the feedback
Fantastic.
along.
There we go. That's perfect. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the brand collaborations. And so one of the things that we found in the research is that, when creators are thinking about the types of collaborations they want to do, sort of quality and kind of like what the brand is about is a huge priority. But really hugely important as well is like the creative empowerment and the role that the creator themselves can play in the collaboration is something that really popped up. And then lastly, how there's an opportunity for sort of like ongoing long-term partnership as opposed to like shorter one-off types of relationships and engagement. So, Gianna, kind of thinking about some of those themes that we heard from creators in the group, what makes a brand collaboration sort of really attractive to you? What kinds of things are you evaluating?
I love when a brand is open to hearing my idea. If they give me specific talking points that are the most important, and then let me come up with the creative for what I know resonates with my audience. I think sometimes a challenge for creators is brands, they want to give you like a word for word script of what they want you to talk about. But then our audience, especially on Snapchat, it's a double-edged sword because they know us so well. They know when we're being genuine about a product that we love it, but they can tell if we're reading off of a script. So I think it works best when brand can come to me and say, this is what we really want to highlight. And I'm like, okay, great. I think this is a way I can make it fun for my audience while still including the important talking points.
No, I think that's perfect, and it makes so much sense that you're emphasizing, like, you came to me for a reason, right? Like, this is like, I know the audience. That's great. So, Yak, when you're working with brands and creators, like, how do you drive an intentional strategy for that activation? How do you have conversations with, sort of like both sides of the collaboration to sort of drive success on that?
There's a few things. I think that one of the things that we always have to look at is what's going to matter the most to the creator. I think starting there matters. I think that's why we're all standing here or sitting here. So I think we always have to start there. Yes, scale matters, objective matters, ethos matters. When I say ethos, what I mean by that is there's a community that you should be thinking about leaning into, a subculture that should match. And it doesn't have to be a perfect one-to-one. So if you're a finance brand, it doesn't mean you have to go find a finance creator. So I'll give you a great example of this. If you wanted to lean into lifestyle, and since Gianna's here with us, let's talk about this for a second. So if you follow Gianna, you know that sometimes one of the characters, if you will, in her stories is her father. He's a very funny human being. He's a little he's like super loving and trust, and clearly there's a trust relationship, right? And not just as a dad, but you can tell. So if I was in a finance brand, I would come and say, okay, I want to be part of this. And then it has to be a collaboration, right? So I want to be in that subculture. I know that Gianna has mentioned a couple times finance in different ways, but she's not a finance creator. She's not going to come and just start talking about finance. But if we take it from the perspective of lifestyle, okay, Gianna, would you be interested in bringing your father along and having a conversation about finances and what that looks like and how we can, right? And now we have built into a community, and we're adding value in a way that is already natural to what Gianna and her audience is looking for. So I think that has got to be one of the most critical aspects, is just understanding that you have to find the behavior that you want to lean into, and then find a creator that you can work with. And I'll triple down on, if you don't listen to what the creator wants to do, then what typically happens is that the content doesn't land, the audience doesn't feel like they are being heard, or they're not expecting, that's not what they're expecting. The creator now feels like they have work to do to fix that or mend that. And so nobody wins in that. So I think that you gotta start with the behavior and what you're trying to accomplish in the subculture. And then when you find the right creator, you gotta partner.
Thanks, fantastic. Okay, let's talk a little bit about followers, because Johnny, you were kind of alluding to some of this. Obviously, apart from the platforms, the way that you interact with your followers and the relationships you have with them is such a critical part of how you develop content. The research shows that creators are very committed to keeping fans engaged. I mean, Johnny, clearly, with 100 posts a day. But we want to make sure that we're continuously, they feel really responsible to continuously be putting new content out, keep that engagement going in the various ways it applies to their particular type of content. Also sharing fan creative content. So like when a fan comes out to you, kind of like making sure that we're sharing that back and getting that broader exposure for them, offering exclusive content in different areas, that type of thing. So what's important to you from an engagement perspective, Gianna, like maybe by platform, and why is Snap effective in building that audience for you?
Yeah, I think the relationship with my audience it's the most important thing. And also when it comes to working with brands, like the trust you have with your audience is the most important thing. So that's why I'm always trying to be as authentic as possible. And that's why I really like Snapchat as a platform, because the way the platform functions, how you just open up into the camera, you can talk directly to it, makes it really easy to just be genuine and bring my audience throughout my day. And they respond with that engagement. I get by far the most engagement on Snapchat, even though it's not where I have the highest number of followers. They're the most engaged. And it's really funny, living in New York City, I get to run into my followers out on the street all the time.
I'd be so excited.
It's so fun. Yeah, I always tell them, if you see me, please come up to me. But I can tell without them even telling me yet if they know me from Snapchat versus another platform, because they'll come up to me and we're having a conversation like we're already best friends, because they see my whole day, every single day, so they know me so well, and it's really cool. And then they'll tell me, oh yeah, I watch you on Snapchat.
That's so great. I actually have a follow-up question based on that. So one of the things that we found in the research too was that creators obviously also have expectations for the followers themselves, like in terms of how they engage, the frequency, that type of thing, and kind of how that differs by platform, which you were just sort of alluding to. What, from your perspective, is like a fair exchange with your followers for like the content that you put out? Like what kinds of things do you expect or hope to get from them in return for that content?
Yeah, I just love, I like to talk about, what's going on currently, if there's events in New York City, or just whatever I'm interested in at the moment, or like pop culture. And I think it's really cool to bring them into that as well. And again, I know I'm talking about this again, story replies, but I use it every single day. It's my favorite feature. And so that's one thing I really like, because usually when I'm creating content, I'm just by myself, exploring the city, bringing them along with me. So it's nice to know that whatever I'm sharing or talking about, they're going to be engaging back, giving me their perspective, and it feels like we're all really having a conversation together. It's not just like, oh, I'm talking at them. It's like we're doing this story together.
That's fantastic, all that. Okay, so I'm getting the signal that we have to sort of wrap things up. But so I'd love to share some success stories, kind of thinking about like what makes, from your perspective, each of you will answer, what makes a great brand creator collaboration? Like what's one that's worked really well, or that you thought had like a really, great impact, something that's sticking in your mind, and why?
Well, I'm picking a non-beauty personal care example because usually people tend to gravitate there. This is for Comcast, and they were launching a new product called Infinity 10G. So it's a bit technical, and they wanted to make it a bit more fun to explain to people what it was. So they partnered with a bunch of Snap stars on the platform who were users of the product. So I like Yak's point of ethos. So they were not necessarily like tech experts, but rather who used the product and kind of used them to explain what the product was. And they had a lens that they had created about the product. And as the creators were using the lens, it became a video, which was then used by the brand as the ad. So it was a very organically created content and then became paid media, which I thought was pretty clever. People knew that they were talking about the new product. It was very like, show how the product is being used in the day in the life of, which I think is the best way to engage when it comes to content creation. And the entire objective was to drive awareness of the product, and this, broke all the benchmarks for Comcast in terms of video completion, but also some of the awareness benchmarks that they had. So I thought it was a good example that's not typically beauty-led, and a product that you don't typically associate with creators, which is broadband and 10G.
Gianna, how about you?
One of my favorites was partnering with Coca-Cola on Snapchat. I'm a huge fan of the brand, and my audience already knows that because I'm drinking one every single day. They see
Yeah, we see it.
But what was really cool is I used to live with my best friend, and we would do this segment on Snapchat where we would go for a walk after work, get our Diet Coke, and answer questions. And then Coca-Cola actually reached out to me later about this BFFs campaign they were doing. So I brought my friend Sarah into it, and we went to try the new flavor out in the city, and it was so fun. And there was a BFF lens, a Snapchat lens to use, so then my audience could also go out with their best friend and try it, and it was so much fun. And that's where you could take an opportunity, like it's not a scripted ad, it's something that fit in perfectly with my content, and my audience was actually so excited about it. The engagement was crazy.
Such a good story. Yak, what about you?
It's a perfect example, by the way, of leaning into the feature of the platform and then building from that. So I love that. We did a program with Pizza Hut and a creator named Joe Mealy. Anybody ever heard of Joe Mealy? He's out of New York, Italian American family. And he brings his family into a lot of his content, and it's absolutely hysterical. His dad is I give Dad a lot of credit because he gets made fun of on a regular basis, and he's the prop basically in a ton of content. And so they created this storyline around this kind of meal deal, if you will. And the reason I love it is because, one, they leaned into the same kind of experience, and they didn't ask him to change his approach. So it was still very fun, very family oriented. But the one thing that I thought they did really, really well was it was a kind of a one-day only experience. And so if you wanted to be part of this and you wanted to have the meal deal, then you had to do it that day in order to get it. And because his audience was prepared for those kind of things, because he asks for feedback, the audience gives feedback, and then he literally will turn to his dad and say, great, they want you to do this now. And his father has to do this, which is, I'm hoping my kids never do this to me. But it works. And so the same kind of approach, and what ended up happening was everyone was already leaning, because they're used to leaning with him, and over 100,000 deals sold later in the same day, all because of behavior, right? So I keep going back to it because I think you have to be there in order to be successful.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Those are great. And I like how different, frankly, that all those stories were. So great. Okay. So going to wrap up. We have a couple of takeaways. So creators aren't going anywhere. That's number one. Once we're here. And I think that, something that is really resonating with me is that we have to be really intentional with how we do brand and creator collaborations. I think that, including the creator along in that process, like allowing that creative voice to come through, creators have a great perspective on their following group. We need to make sure that we think about that when we think about the collaboration. So that's like a big takeaway for me too. Creators and consumers, I mean, we're valuing transparency. Like, let's be, transparent about those brand collaborations, what they look like, and really make sure that allows you to be really authentic. You want to make sure that you can continue to connect with people the way that you are. I think obviously, sounds like Snap, provides you an extra sort of, layer to being able to do that, which is fantastic. And I think that, the other thing is we really need to think about the types of sort of like tools and capabilities that platforms are providing to allow creators to sort of, connect with their team, their followers the way that they want to, and how do we make it easier to create content, to like view and look at engagement and kind of continue that interaction. So thank you all so much for your perspective. I really appreciate it. I'm going to offer you up obviously to the crowd as we go over the course of the night. I'm sure people have follow-up questions, but thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate it for being on the panel. So.
Thank you to everyone for patiently listening.
Yes, of course. No, thank you so much. I feel like I hope there was a head nodding. I feel like everybody was engaged. That's great. Yes, I saw some. I definitely saw snapping. So I'll pass over to Lerna, who's the U.S. Snapchat head of agency, for some closing thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Whitney. Really quickly, I know I'm standing in the way of you and dinner, so short and sweet, but thank you to our panelists and our amazing moderator. Another round of applause. You guys are so great. Nice to meet you all. I'm Lerna Terpanjian. Like Whitney said, I lead our U.S. agency efforts at Snap. I'm about 4 months in, so still a very new journey for me, but really what brought me to Snap is just the undeniable mission and faith that I have in the platform and driving human connection at scale, and creators are such an important part of that. I personally learned so much tonight. I'm so impressed by this crew right here. I mean, the words that really stood out to me tonight were trust, authenticity, intentionality, and the fact that our creators are posting 100, 200, sometimes 300 times a day, which is just unprecedented in my mind. So that means there's so much opportunity for our agencies, our brands, and our partners to come together and really continue to harness that in new ways. So huge thank you to our partners at Ipsos, a big thank you to all of you for coming out tonight, and our partners across Publicis far and wide, and a very special thank you to Sarah Kulha, who I feel most days is managing me versus me managing her, but for putting on this very special night. So big thank you, Sarah. And enjoy dinner. Thank you, guys.